Imagine being invited to a royal feast inside Scotland's most powerful castle. The tables overflow with food, the king himself smiles beside you, and every candle flickers with warmth. But within moments, that feast will turn into a nightmare so shocking it would stain Scottish history forever. This is the story of two young brothers who walked into a banquet for peace and never walked out again. Edinburgh Castle, Scotland. November 24, 1440. The night is cold. The castle walls rise like stone giants, their towers silhouetted against the dark sky. Inside the great hall, the shadows of flickering candles dance across vaulted ceilings, spilling a golden glow over long wooden tables. Servants move swiftly, carrying platters piled high with roasted venison, freshly baked bread, and steaming stews that fill the air with rich, savory scents. Goblets overflow with deep red wine. Laughter and music weave through the hall, disguising the tension that lurks beneath the surface. At the head table sit two brothers. William Douglas, just 16 years old, but already the 7th Earl of Douglas, tall for his age, with eyes sharp beyond his years. Beside him sits his younger brother, David, only 10, his face full of boyish innocence and wonder. For him, this night feels like a dream, a chance to dine beside the young King of Scotland in the grandeur of Edinburgh Castle. They believe they have come for peace. A banquet meant to heal divisions, to unite Scotland after years of bloodshed and rivalry. They do not know that within minutes, the feast will transform into a nightmare. Tonight will be remembered not as a reconciliation, but as betrayal. Not as a celebration, but as the infamous Black Dinner. The goblets clink, the music swells, and all seems well. But beneath the warmth of the feast lies a chilling truth. This night has been planned not to honor the Douglas brothers, but to end them. To understand why this dinner would become one of the darkest betrayals in European history, we must travel back through Scotland's turbulent past. The early 15th century was a time of chaos. King James I had been assassinated in 1437, struck down by conspirators, leaving behind a crown inherited by his son, James II, who was barely 6 years old. A child king on the throne created a dangerous void. Scotland became a land of scheming lords and shifting alliances. Power was not in the crown, but in the hands of nobles who saw opportunity in a child ruler. Among all of Scotland's noble families, one towered above the rest, the Douglases. Their vast lands stretched across the southern border, from the English frontier to Scotland's very core. Their castles rose like fortresses guarding every corner of their domain. Their private armies numbered in the thousands, a force strong enough to rival, and even surpass, the king's own soldiers. To the regent, Chancellor William Crichton, the Douglases were not simply powerful, they were a threat to the very crown itself. For centuries, the Douglases had built their influence through loyalty and war. But when William Douglas, the 6th Earl, fell at the Battle of Verneuil in 1424, his titles passed to his sons, William and David, still children. Raised under the guardianship of their great-aunt, Margaret Douglas, the famed Fair Maid of Galloway, the boys grew up surrounded by wealth, loyalty, and soldiers who treated them like future kings. Margaret herself was no ordinary guardian. She was brilliant, cunning, and ambitious. She understood that her nephews were more than children. They were the keys to maintaining and expanding the Douglas dynasty. By the time young William reached 15, he was formally invested as the 7th Earl of Douglas. The ceremony was no small affair. Thousands attended, noble families from across Scotland and emissaries from abroad. It was a spectacle of wealth and power, a statement to all who watched. The Douglases were untouchable, equal if not superior, to the monarchy itself. But to Chancellor Crichton, this was a dangerous signal. A child king on the throne and a teenage earl commanding more power than the monarchy, it was a recipe for disaster. Crichton believed that if the Douglases were not destroyed, Scotland itself would be torn apart. And so, his mind turned from politics to treachery. Crichton tried everything first. He offered strategic marriages, hoping to bind the Douglas line closer to the crown. He attempted bribes, subtle threats, even considered outright war. But nothing worked. The loyalty of Douglas soldiers and the influence of their allies could not be broken. If the monarchy was to survive, Crichton convinced himself, the brothers had to die. But how? No battlefield victory could defeat them, no political deal could outmaneuver them. Then came the idea. Daring. And dishonorable. If the Douglas brothers could not be defeated in war, they would be defeated at the dinner table. An invitation was drafted. Edinburgh Castle would host a grand banquet, a reconciliation dinner. The young King James II himself would be present, a symbol of unity. Crichton promised solemnly that the sacred laws of hospitality would be honored, that no harm would come to the brothers. In Scotland, such laws were binding. To harm a guest under your roof was an unforgivable crime, an act that could stain a family's name forever. At first, William Douglas hesitated. He was young but not foolish. His advisors warned him, this could be a trap. Crichton cannot be trusted. Yet the promise of peace, the chance to meet the boy king face to face, and the security of ancient traditions eventually swayed him. After all, who would dare to commit murder in the presence of a king? And so, on the 24th of November, William and David set out for Edinburgh Castle with a small escort. The roads they traveled were familiar, lands their family had ruled for generations. The boys felt secure, even hopeful, as the castle came into view. Trumpets sounded as they entered the gates. Servants bowed. Nobles greeted them with courtesy. They were treated with every honor their rank deserved. For young David, it was thrilling. A chance to see the great castle, to dine like royalty, to meet the king himself. For William, it was reassurance. Perhaps the warnings had been wrong. Perhaps Crichton truly sought peace. The great hall was alive with music and laughter. The brothers were seated beside King James II, who, though only a child himself, welcomed them warmly. The food was rich, the wine plentiful, and the atmosphere light-hearted. William began to relax. The danger seemed far away. Maybe, he thought, reconciliation was possible. But betrayal rarely begins with thunder. It begins with whispers. As the evening wore on, subtle changes crept into the hall. More guards appeared at the doors. Servants, strangely armed, lingered longer near the tables. One by one, certain guests slipped away, their absence hidden beneath the noise of feasting. The Douglas brothers, caught in conversation, noticed nothing. Then Chancellor Crichton rose. A goblet in hand, he smiled as though preparing to toast. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to him. Even the king leaned forward, waiting. And then, he gave the signal. From the shadows, soldiers poured into the hall. Blades flashed in the candlelight. Chairs scraped, gasps echoed. William leapt to his feet, reaching for his sword, only to realize it was gone, discreetly taken earlier in the evening. David clutched his arm, trembling, confusion and fear clouding his young face. The sacred bond of hospitality shattered in an instant. The hall erupted into chaos. William, just 16, was seized and dragged from his chair. He shouted, fought, demanded justice, but the soldiers held fast. David screamed, his small hands gripping his brother, begging for mercy. The boy king himself cried out, trying to intervene, but he too was restrained by his own guards, powerless to stop what was about to unfold. Without trial, without warning, William Douglas was executed before the horrified eyes of his brother and his king. The young earl's blood stained the stone floor of the great hall. David, just 10 years old, was forced to watch. His sobs echoed through the silence as he clung to the last memory of his brother. Moments later, he too was taken. The boy's pleas meant nothing. His innocence offered no protection. He was killed swiftly, his life ended in the same hall where he had only wanted to see the king and share in a banquet. The black dinner was complete. The laws of hospitality lay in ruins. The great hall, once alive with music and laughter, was silent but for the muffled cries of a traumatized child king. But the betrayal did not end with the deaths of William and David. Crichton had planned every detail. As the boys' bodies were taken away, royal soldiers swept across Douglas lands. Castles were seized. Armies disbanded. Allies arrested. It was a ruthless strike meant to decapitate the Douglas power in one single night. Yet what Crichton saw as victory soon unraveled into disaster. Even the enemies of the Douglas clan were horrified. The breaking of hospitality was too great a crime. If nobles could be murdered under royal protection, who could ever again trust the word of the crown? Margaret Douglas was devastated. The woman who had raised the boys wept with grief, but her sorrow turned quickly to rage. She vowed vengeance, rallying Douglas allies and spreading the tale of betrayal across the kingdom. The reaction was explosive. Families who had stood neutral, even hostile, to the Douglases now found themselves appalled by the treachery. The betrayal united them in anger. Outrage swept the land like wildfire. Crichton had slain 2 boys, but in doing so, he had created an army. By early 1441, Scotland was ablaze. Noble banners rose in rebellion. Castles were stormed, villages burned, armies marched. Civil war tore through the land, precisely the chaos Crichton had claimed to prevent. And the young king? James II never forgot what he saw. Though only a boy at the time, the screams of the Douglas brothers would haunt him for life. He grew up scarred by mistrust, unable to look upon his nobles without suspicion. His reign would forever bear the shadow of that night. The Black Dinner became more than an act of betrayal. It became a curse on the monarchy itself. The deaths of William and David Douglas echoed across centuries. The tale was retold as a warning of the dangers of unchecked ambition and broken trust. Crichton may have believed he secured the throne, but his name would forever be stained with dishonor. Instead of strengthening the crown, his treachery weakened it. No promise of peace, no assurance of safety, could ever again be taken without doubt. Even now, more than 500 years later, the story lingers. The candles are long extinguished, the feast reduced to dust. But the betrayal of that night still whispers through the cold stone of Edinburgh Castle. The Black Dinner stands as a chilling reminder that power built on treachery can never last. That once trust is broken, the consequences reach far beyond the intentions of those who commit the crime. And though the Douglas brothers are long gone, their deaths remain a somber testament to an age when life was often sacrificed at the altar of ambition. But even by the brutal standards of those times, the Black Dinner was an outrage that shocked Scotland to its core, and still haunts history to this day.